Hey, what's up? I'm Josh Vosgreen, and a little while back I shared 5 things that I wish that I learned sooner as a gigging bassist, and what I got back were a bunch of really great ideas in the comments on that video. So I wanted to share those with you in this video. We're just going to blast through these and I'll share my thoughts as we go, and these are going to apply to bassists and musicians of all instruments. So let's dig in. Never forget a clipper for your fingernails. Ever try to play with a broken or split nail? Yes, this is a really great tip, and I can attest to its importance because I sometimes still forget. I just really need to get some extra nail clippers to leave in the gig bag, but sometimes I've been at a gig and I needed them, and then I have to lean on the guitar player, which works okay as a bassist because guitar players are more finicky about their fingernails, so you can guess that your guitar player will probably have clippers. But anyway, yeah, you don't want to have nail problems, especially like if they're getting too long on your plucking fingers as a bass player and your plucks start sounding like too naily and you're trying to do your like soul or country gig and it's just no good. So nail clippers. I would add play a bass that sits nicely in a band mix, one that makes your band sound good. Lots of boomy or trebly basses sound great at home and at the music store, while they don't blend as well once the band starts playing. Yes, I really wish that I learned this sooner too. I'm surprised I didn't think of it for the original video, because for many years of my gigging life, I started gigging when I was 15, so I was a very young person when I was first gigging in my first decade or so. And I got this bass that I'm holding right now, my PV Cirrus, well over 10 years ago, like in my late teens. And for a long time, it was my only bass. And I didn't know that there was anything wrong with that, because it sounds good. People say it looks pretty at gigs. And I played well, so I got away with not actually bringing the right bass to the gig. So what I've learned, which is inside this comment, is bring the right bass for the gig. Don't bring your fancy Fodera or your Warwick with tons of trebly high end or whatever to a gig where you should really be bringing a P bass with flat wounds. Because we're not, as gigging bass players, this is a pretty bass specific tip, by the way. I said this would be for all musicians, and then I'm launching right in with the bass tips. But as bass players, most of the gigs that we do are about replicating a tone that already exists. It's not about reinventing bass tone that's never been conceived of before. So if you're doing a soul gig, bring a P bass, because that's what everybody played on every soul record you've ever listened to. Jamerson, Chuck Rainey, Duck Dunn, Willie Weeks, David Hood, Tommy Cogville. It's all P bass. So bring a P bass to that gig. Bring a jazz bass to a jazz bass gig, and bring a Cirrus to a gig where a Cirrus belongs, which I'm still figuring out what gig that is exactly. Check your fly before you go on stage. When you're on stage, don't pick your nose. Yes, these are very good tips. I don't think that I've gone on stage with my fly undone, but I've definitely showed up to a venue with my fly undone, and I'll like set down all my gear and kind of get settled, and then I realize, wow, my fly is super undone. So make that part of your gig checklist. And the nose picking thing, also good advice. Not a good look, unless your band is called the Nose Pickers. If you use a set list, make sure every band member has the same set list. Don't get drunk or high before playing. Go pee shortly before you start to play so you don't have to run to the bathroom after 3 songs. Drink some water in between songs. Not too much, but stay hydrated. Switch off your phone. Make sure all significant others are off the stage, and all conversations between band members and SOs are finished or on hold when you start playing and until you stop playing. Interact with the audience and thank them at the very least at the end of your gig. Okay, there's a lot of stuff in here. Let's see, set list thing. Yes, everybody having the same set list. Very helpful. And also, if you're on a gig where you know that the band leader can't be trusted to stick to a set list, then be ready for that. Like, make sure you know all the songs really well. Have your music ready if you're reading so that you can quickly jump around. Just don't get caught unawares. Not getting drunk or high before playing. I personally agree. I wouldn't play a gig drunk or high, but that has a lot to do with the fact that I haven't practiced drunk or high. And some people are just high all the time, so they're high at the gig too, and it kind of works okay because that's their resting state. I'm not super into that. And I do notice, as somebody who doesn't drink alcohol very often, that if I drink before a gig or around the time of a gig or something, anyway, if there's any alcohol in my system while I'm playing, and I'm doing anything technical, I make mistakes that I would never normally make. And I'm like, wow, I sure drank a little bit of alcohol. And not even being drunk, but just being buzzed. So I personally don't drink around gigs unless I'm okay with making some stupid mistakes, which I'm usually not. Okay, let's finish this one. Yes, I agree. Go pee shortly before you start to play. I am really into hydration, so I drink a lot of water and I pee a lot, so I really am strategic about peeing, and I recommend that you also stay hydrated and be strategic about your pee. Drink water in between songs. I agree. I'm drinking water in between songs while I make this video. Switch off your phone, obviously. Not just as a courtesy and because it's super lame to be looking at your phone on stage, but next to certain amps, if somebody calls you or something, you can get weird interference and stuff, and that's also not a good look. Always pee before downbeat and during every set break. Nothing worse than being mid-set and wondering if you can make it. Yes, it's another pee comment just to underscore the importance of peeing at the right time and staying hydrated, and also how many comments I got about making sure you go pee at the right time. This is a real concern for musicians, and it just doesn't get talked about in the news or in music college or anything, but this is what we really worry about, is are you on time and did you pee at the right time? Bring duct tape. So helpful / useful in so many situations. I don't have anything interesting to say about this one besides that I agree. Duct tape is useful. So is gaff tape. Gaff tape is a cool thing to bring too. For the love of God, take your tuner off your headstock. Yes, this is a good one. This isn't super cool looking on stage. Like, it's fine, but not super cool. Take your tuner off your headstock. People should be given the image that like something magical is happening and somehow music is being summoned from these instruments, not like, you don't want to show them all the nuts and bolts of how you make it happen. So yes. Do not forget to say hello and goodbye to your host and bring a spare bass if possible. Even for the rehearsal, I, the bass player, parentheses the helpful one, have a capo, spare wires, a drum key tuner, and I used to have drumsticks too, until I trust who the drummer is. Okay, saying hello and goodbye, yes, I like this, especially if you are in a band and you're part of like the image that the band is presenting to the venue or the booker, whoever, then I think it's even more important than if you're a sideman and they might not remember who you are or whatever. But also, I think it's still important if you're trying to be part of a musical network or community just to build a reputation as a nice person. Bringing a spare bass, I personally very rarely bring a spare bass. I think if I was doing a big high stakes gig, I would obviously bring like 2 spare basses. But I haven't broken a string since I was like 16, and actually I have a quick story about this. One time I almost needed a spare bass because the one flaw I know of with the PV Sirius's from the 90s is they used really shitty parts for the battery clips in the back. So one of those wires was like loose and my bass was not passing signal. And so luckily somebody brought soldering equipment and like soldered this wire for me before the show. It was like a solo bass set too, so they would have noticed that I wasn't playing during the solo bass set if nobody fixed that. So that is an argument for bringing a spare bass, is poorly soldered cables inside your instrument. Don't show up to a gig with gear that you haven't quite tested in rehearsal. That awesome new preamp or pedal or bass or whatever might have a problem you didn't hear in your bedroom at low levels, but is now screeching at 100 dB or cutting out at bad times during the gig. Yes, I agree with this one. Obviously, reliability is the main thing you want to test for, like have something for a while and establish like, okay, I can trust this thing that it will consistently make noise when I want it to make noise and not make noise when I don't want it to make noise. And also, specifically with effect pedals, I think it's really valuable to get some rehearsal time in with those, because playing with an effect pedal out of the context of a band, particularly as a bass player, is not totally actionable data. The way an effect is going to sound when you add the drums and guitar into the mix and stuff, totally different. The gain level even is going to be totally different. If you set your distortion levels for how you think they should be solo, then when you play with a band, they're going to be way too quiet because of how distortion works with ears and stuff. So getting your effect settings dialed in rehearsal is also really important, besides trusting the gear to work consistently. Okay, this one's a little long, so I'm going to just read some edited highlights, but you can read the whole comment. This is all really good stuff. So noodling, I talked about noodling in the last video. Noodling is the most incredibly selfish thing that can happen during attempted sound checks. Under preparation meant that some players try to turn sound checks into rehearsals, which ruins the fine-tuning with the PA. And then my only contribution to all this is to look professional in your setup, to hide leads/cables away where possible, have a clean playing area so no one trips over your crap, and check your clothing and look impressional in whatever genre you end up playing. So yes, thank you for this contribution. This is all really good stuff. On noodling on stage, people turning soundcheck into rehearsal, yes, I hate this. Pet peeve. Yeah, soundcheck is really not rehearsal time. Unless it explicitly is. Like there's tons of blank space time at the venue. The sound person is all set with their mix, and you say, is it okay if we run through a couple songs? And they give you the thumbs up. Then maybe it's okay. The doors are closed. The crowd is not in yet. There's specific scenarios where that's okay. But generally, it's not really okay. And looking professional in the setup, really agree with this here too. Hiding cables away, that means good cable management, which a lot of people have terrible cable management. If I could give one quick cable management tip, it would be have some cables that are a little longer than you think you'll need so that you can route them around. Like if a straight line to your amp is not a good safe walkway, if you have enough length on your cable to do a little like loop around so that you can join it with some other cables that are already on stage, and then those can all get gaff taped down so that there aren't tripping hazards, and also just so that your band doesn't look stupid on stage with like dangly cables everywhere. So yeah, cable management. And also check your clothing. I agree with that too. Think about what kind of vibe you're going for at the gig. I often find it valuable to ask a band leader if I'm just subbing with somebody, what's the vibe at the gig? Is this a wedding? Is this a corporate event? Is this a casual bar gig? What's everyone else going to be wearing? Because you don't want to show up in jeans when everyone else is wearing a suit, and you don't want to show up in a suit when everyone else is wearing jeans. So it's worth considering that to be a detail that you want to get advanced communication about, along with the time and the pay and what music you're playing and stuff. If you are playing with other bands, show up early/stay late and watch their sets. Support other artists. Yeah, this one's really important too. In a number of respects, like just in terms of being a cool person and being a cool musician and being part of a community and hearing what other people are doing. And also on a selfish level, you might actually benefit from doing that. You might hear like, whoa, that drummer's awesome. I want to play with that drummer sometime. And then you like connect later and say, hey, I really enjoyed your set. Could we maybe play sometime and exchange info? Or yeah, it's just a way to connect with other people who love doing the same thing you love doing, which is making noise with instruments. And also, yeah, just on a coolness level, if you imagine if you're playing with a band and you want people to stick around for your set, well, maybe you can start by sticking around for other people's sets. And then you can, at the very least, you can guilt trip them into staying. Like, they all stayed for our set. Like, let's stay for theirs, begrudgingly. But then maybe they'll be staying for fun if your band is good. Yeah. When you're on stage, the instrument is treated like a firearm. Fingers off the part that brings forth a noise until you are ready and willing to shoot. Play. Yeah, I really like this one. I talked about noodling in my last video, which is why this comment came up. This is a much more succinct and funny way of saying what I said in the last video, which is if you imagine that this is your trigger finger, you don't want to just go trigger, 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 trigger when you're not actually ready to fire forth your noise bullets. What is this analogy becoming? This might vary by genre and you might disagree, but for the metal band I play with, the lead guitarist and I, the bass player, are in the habit of bringing our instruments to the parking lot and warming up 20 to 30 minutes before the set. Since we play fairly technical stuff right off the bat, if we do not warm up, our set suffers. We always make sure to be back in the bar by the end of the opener set or before soundcheck. What are your thoughts? Yeah, this is an interesting question. I think for what this person is doing, which is technical metal, totally makes sense because you're playing a kind of music where you actually need to have warmed up fingers. The question of warm-ups is interesting to me because as a bass player, most like working bass player gigs, you don't, in my experience, you don't really need to warm up your hands. Like if you're just going to play Mustang Sally, yes, you better slow your Mustang down. That doesn't require warm up. Like I could wake up out of bed, chop off 8 of my fingers and go, okay, that first note wasn't very good, but You know, that doesn't require warm-up. But if you're playing shreddy technical metal, insert Josh playing shreddy technical metal here, because that's never going to happen, because I don't have what it takes. Yeah, warm-up makes sense. So I think it does vary by genre and also what you're doing in that genre. I mean, you could be in a metal band that doesn't require a ton of warm-up if it's not super challenging technical music. What I like about this person's comment is that they're doing the warm-up privately in the parking lot, not on stage during sound check or like before their set after the band changeover. That's the wrong time to warm up. But yeah, that makes sense. The only problem I see with doing it in the parking lot is if you have a cold gig, then you go out there and like freeze your hands off. So having some hand warming plan might also be helpful. If you just go watch other bands play, you can learn so much. You'll see them do things that annoy you, and then you'll learn what not to do, like noodling between songs, and you'll see them do things that are awesome, and then you can use that in your own show. It might be something super simple or super mind-blowing, but you can always learn something. On an off night, don't squander the opportunity to go see another band play. If you don't feel like it, and trust me, I've been there before, it's worth it because you might just learn something. Yeah, this is a really cool thought, and it sort of applies to that other person's comment about sticking around for other bands on the bill when you're playing a show, but this is more about actually just like leaving the house. Nobody's paying you to leave the house for a gig. You just leave the house and go hear music. And honestly, this is something I've struggled with over the years too. When I don't have a gig, the inertia to stay home is powerful. So for me to get myself out to a jam or to go hear someone else's gig is a bit of an effort, but it is really worth it because you, exactly what the comment says, you just observe like, oh, that worked, that didn't work, that worked, that didn't work. I liked that, I didn't like that. You form yourself more as a musician and as a professional musician in really valuable ways. It's never going to be, if you come in with an attitude of humility and like, I'm going to learn something no matter what tonight, you're always going to learn something. It's never going to be a wasted experience, even if you think, oh, this band's going to be awesome, and then you don't enjoy it at all, or vice versa, or anything. It's always going to be a valuable experience that you can learn something from. Okay, last up, number 15. There's a lot of stuff in this comment. I'm going to read it all. Keep in mind this is very serious and not at all tongue-in-cheek. 1. Time when you can get to the gig at the latest possible moment. 2. Don't pack anything more than your bass and maybe a cable. The sound guy should have another one. It's his job after all. 3. Don't help anyone. You're just a bass player. Do you think they'd help you? 4. Bring drugs in your bass case instead of your pocket. 5. Show off on stage before the band starts playing, or no one in the building will know how good you are. 6. Always drink and get high before you show up to the gig, so no one knows you're drunk and high. Thank you so much for watching all the way to this point in the video. Please click like and subscribe to this channel so that the YouTube gods know that you are pleased by this content. And you can also support me on Patreon at patreon.com/JoshFossgreen if you want to get some cool bonusy things every time I put out a video and just be a supportive of this channel person. Is that a sentence? I think it's a sentence. Thank you for watching. I'll see you soon. Peace.